start off here. Carrie, I'm going to add you to us up here. Carrie Boyder, how are you doing? It's been actually kind of a while.
It has been. I'm so glad to be seeing you all. And it's like virtual. That's how long it's been. Our technology has completely evolved from audio only to video here. So that's pretty cool.
So one day they're just going to roll TV screens up in front of the federal courthouse, and we'll be on the other side bitching, yeah, that's right. And we won't have to deal with actual humans. We'll just be
one of the audio only times I researched it before the show today, and Stacy's going to be coming on a little bit. There was a time in July of 2013 on this very issue. You and Stacy were together on Planet Greetrees with us, and that was all just on phone or just audio broadcast. Mm-hmm. And so just about 8 years ago.
Yeah, that's exactly. I looked at it myself because it was around May of 2013 that I started really working with the Duvals quite a bit, and I looked back at when that was, because it's been a blur, of course, for all of us. Just Michigan alone, right? So, but yeah, it's also been this like craw in my side as all this progress is made. Like Jerry feels like this, the man we've left behind. That it seems like no matter what we do, we haven't been able to get him out. It's frustrating, and the last thing I want to see is him serve that whole entire 10-year sentence. Well, I'm happy that it's finally almost come to an end. This has been 8 years that we've all been working on this together. And thank you all for just continuing to shine a light year after year after year after year on these issues. It's so amazing. And then for being a catalyst that does bring like Sharon and I back together here on the airwaves. And it's just great.
Hi, Sharon. You're live with us now.
Nice seeing you guys.
Good. Thank you for being here. Carrie, thank you for being here too. And so back then, there were many accolades that you had in activism and working with people in the cannabis prisoners in the federal system and running for public office. You were activist of the year in some regard. I remember in the course of all this, just done a lot of great work nationally for a while. But what are you up to now?
So I moved back to Montana, like a lot of activists who dive into this head first. I had a little burnout for a while, had to recover. And I'm making some incredible headway here on larger prohibition reform issues. I actually have restarted a nonprofit women's organization for national prohibition reform, which has been around since 1929. So Pauline Morton Sabin was one of the founders of WONPR. And she actually helped overturn alcohol prohibition by galvanizing women around that issue in just 5 short years. So 1929 is when it was founded, and they were able to disband actually by 1934 when the 21st Amendment passed, overturning the 18th Amendment. So really just trying to reinvigorate that movement to get those last little holdouts of prohibition that still exist and are still really plaguing us all today, including, getting people like Jerry Duval home with his family where he belongs.
Right on. Still at it. And I see. So that's very good for everybody. Thank you very much.
We talk about Michael Thompson here as the state of Michigan. That's a statewide case. But when you talk about Jerry, that's a federal case. And Terry, you've dealt with both state-based and federal-based prosecutions and incarcerations. There's a significant difference when you start working on a federal basis too, right? I mean, everything becomes infinitely more difficult.
Yeah, they're intertwined intricately because what happens is you're often given an opportunity to go through the state system. And if you push that, then you end up in the federal system. That's the first way that they punish you for exercising your right to a trial, just in the state system, right? And so then when you get in the federal system, that's where mandatory minimums come into play. If the mandatory minimums don't apply, the sentencing guidelines apply, which are no better than the mandatory minimums. That's where you start to go on trial and things like being able to tell the truth in trial. We could not tell the truth about following state medical marijuana law in court until 2018, even though we changed the federal law in 2014. It was not allowed to be introduced till we took it all the way to the federal courts with the McIntosh ruling, allowing us all to finally be able to introduce that evidence in court that we were complying with state law. So this is not a slow or not a fast process, even though it does seem fast when you're looking at 8 years of progress that we've made. But It's really been a fight on everyone's part. Every prisoner, every family member, every advocate has had to just scrape for every little bit that we've gotten along the way.
Yeah. And those particular decisions that you talked about, they don't automatically require the courts to reconsider cases that have already been heard. You have to petition the courts to get your case heard under those new circumstances. That would be, the state legal compliant nature of the Duval cultivation situation. In fact, their case is so heinous because they actually had local officials from a law enforcement agency telling them exactly how to create a legal conforming grow operation, and then came back later and
as a federal agent and arrested under federal law. We heard that. We went down to Cincinnati for the federal appeals court, and Sharon, obviously very aware of all this, and was there, mother of Jerry. Thank you very much for joining us, and to hear the description by the attorney. I forgot the attorney's name, but did a very great job of
Florida. I think they came from. They were wonderful.
Came from Florida, right? And describing how Deputy Glick engineered this just bizarre and heinous trap. Just amazing. The fact that he stays in prison after that was, I guess, not too surprising after so many years of seeing this stuff, but still ridiculous and sensational.
Sharon, you were there at the time. I mean, you know all about this. What are your reflections about that time and the compliant nature of Jerry's grow?
Well, I was there, and Glick did come out and with a bunch of other people and told him exactly what he had to do to put up the greenhouse and fence and barbed wire and post all of his stuff. And right after he did that, and his daughter, Ashley, and the son Jeremy were caregivers, and they're the ones that had the plants in the greenhouses. But right after they did that, they contacted the federal and had the federal come out and arrest him. They took everything away from him, his home, his vehicles, his furniture. He had nothing left, absolutely nothing. And Glick told him that he would be perfectly okay if he did what he was told to do. So it's really a shame on how they lied to him. And he was 100% state legal, but the federal came in and arrested him.
So one thing that you mentioned that's very important to this case is that all of the plants that Jerry was charged for were legally assigned to caregivers, either Ashley or Jeremy, who are just utilizing that particular space to conduct legal caregiver operations. Yes. So Jeremy technically wasn't in charge or dominion of any of those plants.
No. But they charged him for being on his property.
Yeah. And of course, with the federals, they don't really care at all about state legal compliance. Carrie, you've seen that before. How unique was the situation or the circumstances surrounding, the Duval case here? How have we seen that replicated in other places across the United States?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, their case is not all that unique. This is a pretty systematic pattern that they do, where you have local agents who are cross-deputized as federal agents. Sometimes they come in as state agents and they tell you, here's what you need to do to be compliant. And then sometimes they come back a week later with the federal vest on saying, you're now breaking federal law. That happens often. And part of what happens with the federal system is that they charge the most people possible so that they can leverage the conspiracy charges to get everybody to plead guilty so that they don't go to trial. And in 98% of the cases, people do not go to trial. And when you actually do, like Jerry Duval did, they throw the book at you to punish you for exercising your right to trial. And so in Jerry's case, like when you talk about how it's worse for the feds than the state when you're prosecuted, the sentencing scheme alone is particularly heinous. So Jerry had a very old criminal record, like decades old. But that alone, when he got sentenced, made him eligible for what they call a doubler, meaning his 5-year mandatory minimum sentence that anyone else in his case would have served got doubled to 10 years simply because of his conduct 20 years prior to this.
And they don't particularly like it when you try to fight it.
No, they do not
Neither.
like when you try to fight it. And so if you do actually succeed and they haven't managed to turn all of your co-defendants against you. So what they do is when you cooperate, in order to get a reduction in your sentence, you must actually testify in trial or give some sort of knowledge. So they charge you all with conspiracy, say that if you don't plead guilty, you go to trial and you get these stiff penalties. If you do plead guilty, in order to get a lesser sentence, you must cooperate against your co-conspirators. And then that's how they build a case where they otherwise wouldn't have, off of nothing, right? Off of completely state legal conduct. And so the other thing really about this that just got me, they went to the extreme lengths with the Duvals. And again, this isn't uncommon. Part of why they cross-deputize is around asset forfeitures and the seizure of those assets and who gets those assets. So the reason the local sheriffs and local police cooperate with the feds is because they get a share of the assets that are seized. So in the case of the Duvals, they didn't just prosecute Ashley and Jeremy. They didn't just prosecute their father and take him to prison for 10 years. They took that family farm that Sharon had worked for her whole life to pay for. They took that generational wealth that her family had worked for and stripped that from them and auctioned it off and used the assets to probably buy the next battering ram for the next raid. And that's just egregious. And that happens all the time, state by state by state.
And you mentioned something that shouldn't go unnoticed. 98% of the time, the feds secure a guilty in every case that they go after, especially where cannabis or illicit substances are concerned. That's one of the reasons why people are willing to cooperate for the feds, because it's so incredibly rare for you to actually beat them once you get in federal court. They're just so dominant with the penalties and with the tools that they can wield.
It's right. I have one time beaten them, and it took me working on it for over 5 years to actively even get to the point. And then after we changed the law, after the court said they had to admit this, after everyone had said, give it up, it still took the feds 3 years to come back and fully dismiss that case. And they didn't even do it so that they could not refile the charges. It was done so that, technically speaking, if the McIntosh ruling or if the Rohrabacher-Farr amendment, which is renewed every single year, if that goes away, they could go back and re-prosecute these people. That's the only time we've ever technically won. And is it winning when they've taken 8 years of your life? I mean, one of the defendants died in that process. There's no winning here against the feds.
No. In the specific case of the Duvals, we talked about Jerry being in prison. Can you talk a little bit, Sharon, about what it's like having to leave your family's home, the home that you built, and move and have to be relocated as a prisoner of the drug war, as Jerry's?
Yes, it was devastating. We lost everything that we had worked for years and years, and it's just a shame. Even the federal, when they tried to come onto my property, they held machine guns on me and a tank and everything to get onto my property, which they should have never been on. But it was just showing their authority on getting onto my property also, just to use my driveway. So I just told them, go ahead and shoot me. I didn't give a crap, But it was awful losing everything that we had worked for. Right now I have and Jamie, I want to really thank you for the donation of the GoFundMe for Jerry Lee. Thanks a lot. I do have a GoFundMe page up just to try to get him a little bit of help so he can get his driver's license back and insurance and light bills turned on and all that. So I'm not asking for that much, but I'm trying to help him out. I haven't talked to Jerry Lee for 3 years. He has totally shut all of us down. He had a bad kidney infection that it affected his brain. So now he won't talk to us. I tried to contact the prison. They will not tell me one thing about him. I tried to talk to his counselor. They told me I can't talk to his counselor. I tried talking to our nurse. They said, nope, can't talk to our nurse. So I'm just having a hard time right now with him being moved into the new prison. He did have 21 eye operations, an open heart, broken back. He had to have dialysis for 4 months. He had a kidney and a pancreas transplant. And he had diabetic. He was a diabetic since he was 7 years old. So my son has really been sick mostly all of his life. So I just want to thank all of you for trying to get him out early, but nothing has worked so far yet. And thanks again, Jamie, for the donation.
Well, of course. What is actual status? What's likelihood? What could happen? I mean, is there a possibility he could get out? It seemed like at one point that was kind of being discussed.
I don't know. They won't tell me anything. I tried to ask him on the new prison where he's at in, Ashland, Kentucky right now. And they won't tell me anything about his medical condition. So I just don't know. I wanted to know if he was on the right medication. And they said, well, they think they know that they are, but I just don't know about his condition anymore.
And he just moved to Ashland from where?
He was in Lexington, Kentucky, and he has just been moved to Ashland. It's a lower security place. So I don't know if they're getting ready to release him. But I see they did add 1 more month onto his release date.
Wow. Has there been any COVID concerns regarding Jerry and the prison that he's at? That was certainly an issue here in Michigan as the virus ran through our prison system.
Right.
Do you recall, Sharon, if there was any concern about COVID and Jerry in prison?
Yeah, I contacted the news on the prisons and stuff. And when he was in Massachusetts, I know that quite a few people had passed away. And I know they did also when he was in Lexington. But I know nothing on his progress or anything.
Wow.
Man, I did not know that's really horrible. I'm sorry to hear that.
And his dad passed away 4.5 years ago. So I think that kind of affected him also.
Sure.
Yeah, the despair of being locked up while something like that's happening and knowing that you have no way to comfort or be comforted by those that you'd like to see most at that moment, that can be damaging. I understand.
Yeah, yes, it is. Very much so. I just hope he starts talking to one of us pretty soon.
Terry, how common is this sometimes that long-term incarcerated persons detach from their connections to the outside world?
Very common. It's actually, again, set up systematically. So you have all of the built-in charges. I mean, to put commissary on an account, to maintain, it costs money for them to send an email out. It costs money for them to make a call, right? So you have to, if you don't have a family who can afford to put money on your books for you to do that, there's no communication. And in this case, the more that you're subjected to solitary confinement, which I know has happened to Jerry in some of these cases, for whatever reason, the more your mental health status slips. And so for a period there, he was at Lexington, and that was the hotspot for COVID in the country. And so that's, I really, contacted Sharon again, kicked back in, was like, let's try to do something to get him out. I just can't give up hope on Jerry, and, but if you can't communicate with him, just to file a pardon request, he has to be able to sign that. He has to be able to fill things out, and we can't communicate with him. And they're certainly not making it easy to get back in contact with them. And that doesn't include the moves all around and, the adding the disappearing of the good time. There's only 15% you're eligible for anyway. And so if there was, he could have lost that month of good time because the whole entire unit he was in got locked down. I mean, there's just so much out of your control. And so, yeah, a lot of people shut down at some point because they have to it's called doing your time, right? You got to do your time the way you can do your time. Nobody else can do it for you. So however you have to cope. And I suspect with Jerry, in addition to his health slipping and, having just, many, many issues that have happened while he's been in there, and watching people get out continuously, watching the laws change, watching his case be mentioned, and yet he's there. He's stuck, right? I'm sure he's shut down at some point. And that's just been really hard for all of us on the outside because we want to help. And it just kind of hamstrings the whole situation. Even if there was something we could do, which we seem to be stuck. Like Sharon said, we've tried almost everything.
It seems like the traditional things that we would normally think of with prisoners, parole, commutation, some of those things, commutation, not at all on the table. And this is the regular process to achieve parole, is to do your entire bit and then get released back into society. And there's no way we can advance that any faster. There's no tools available to us then, eh?
Well, and going back to what you mentioned about retroactivity, right? So no, when we pass laws, they don't become automatically retroactive. If they did, Jerry would have been let out a long time ago, whether through the Rohrabacher-Farr Act or through this First Step Act, which has released tons of people on compassionate release and clemency, which is another frustrating thing here, is that we submitted not one, but 2 compassionate release requests for Jerry when this all began. The first one we submitted before he even reported to prison, saying, this man is very sick. It's going to cost you $1 million a year to keep him in your care. Please let us take care of him at home. And they said, well, he's not in prison yet, so we can't consider it. So we submitted it again once he actually got there, and we got turned down. And now the First Step Act is using compassionate release as a way to get people out, but he's already been considered and turned down. So we don't have that tool necessarily. It's so frustrating.
We are in that tween time between complete forbiddance and somewhat acceptance. And that means there's a lot of soldiers that are going to get left stuck in between the rules and the application thereof. I just wish there was an ombudsman or something that could do that.
Let's.
Jerry served this whole bit. What would be his expected out date? I was going to ask.
He went in 2013, May, I believe, right, Sharon? So it would be.
Yeah, his release date now is October 10th of 2022.
And that's with the so-called good time of 15% factored in, which isn't very much, as you can see on 10 years.
Right.
What would have been 2013, May of 2013.
Right.
Jamie.